Captain, we have them. We've established Transporter Lock, the Star Trek podcast. Join Ken and crew each week as they explore strange new episodes, seek out new plots and new characters, and boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
Hello and welcome to Transporter Lock for January 2026. I'm your co-host, Chief Engineer Ken Gagney. This month, for the first time since May 5th, 2022, the Star Trek universe is expanding with a whole new series. Just this past week, we saw the long-awaited debut of Star Trek Starfleet Academy. This series is a spin-off of Star Trek Discovery and thus is set in the far-flung future about 900 years after Star Trek Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and all the other shows that I and many others grew up with. This is a great entry point for new fans of the series, although there is certainly a lot of history for those of us who are well familiar with the 60 years of Star Trek that has now been on the air. In order to review this new show and this new series and this new season, I am joined by somebody who is somewhat new to the modern era of Star Trek herself. Please join me in welcoming Cadet Staci Lee. Hello, Staci.
Hi, Ken. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being had. It's such a pleasure to have you on the show and to have you to watch Starfleet Academy with. This is, in fact, the first time I've had on the show a co-host who I'm consistently watching the show with every week, not just a occasional one-off like Sabriel and I would sometimes do, but actually every single week. And therefore, it has been a treat to be able to watch the show with you and then not talk about it at all and like not pause and turn to each other and ask each other questions because we know we're going to talk about it on the podcast.
I've really been trying to limit myself so I don't ask you any questions.
As have I. So, Staci, before we get into the first two episodes of Starfleet Academy, because that's how the cadence of this podcast will be working, it's going to be a bi-weekly podcast. Every two episodes of Star Trek Starfleet Academy, we'll have one episode of the podcast. And that means we have one episode now because we just saw the first two episodes this past week. And before we get into reviewing those shows, let's hear a little bit about who it is that will be reviewing these shows with me. Cadet Staci Lee, who are you?
Well, as you said, I'm Cadet Staci Lee, and I chose that intentionally, that title, because I have a very limited exposure to Star Trek. And so I really wanted to be able to provide that new perspective and to encourage everybody who may be listening to this for the first time or who is new to the Star Trek universe, that you're not alone. And also that you're never too young or too old to get into Star Trek. My first experience with Star Trek was when I was young, and watched The Next Generation with my dad, who I lovingly call Pops. So Pops and I would watch this. And before he passed away a few years ago, we watched the new Star Trek movies with Chris Pine. And it was actually a conversation with you, Ken, that I had about my nostalgia with TNG, but not really remembering anything that had you encourage me to start watching Picard. And so I watched Star Trek Nemesis in preparation for that and watched Picard and just fell in love, of course, with Star Trek and wanted to keep watching and keep going with the current and the past series.
I love that. So there have been a lot. You mentioned TNG and Nemesis and Picard. There are a lot of other shows in the Star Trek franchise. Just briefly, have you seen the original series, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, or Prodigy?
So I know a little bit of the pop culture from some of them. I am familiar with Tribbles. I am familiar with some of the jokes that are made, but my experience really is just limited to TNG when I was a preteen, and also the new movies, and Picard, and now Starfleet Academy.
Okay, because I know in discussions with you, you mentioned some familiarity with characters from Voyager, for example, 7 of 9, who showed up on Picard.
Yes, yeah. So again, more of the pop culture references. So Jeri Ryan, I was familiar with her, and she's also a really great actor. So being able to recognize some of the faces and some of the references.
Gotcha. The movies you saw with Chris Pine, you may not know, are referred to as part of the Kelvin universe. So this is an alternate timeline that is separate from the TV shows.
Hmm.
So the universe where Kirk's father, played by Thor, died at a young age, etc., that will almost never be referenced in the history of the shows that you and I are watching.
I do consider that as its kind of its own standalone entity, because I do know that the reboot that J.J. Abrams did was trying to just put a whole new spin on Star Trek itself. So, but yeah, thanks for putting it back into perspective.
Sure. In addition to the fresh eyes that you bring to this podcast in terms of the Star Trek universe, you also have your own unique areas of expertise. Would you like to share any of those with us?
Yeah, so I have a very eclectic background. I have an associate's in archaeology, with a specialty in Ohio Valley lithics that is so old that I don't remember anything anymore. But I am really interested in archaeology. And so being able to have those historical references and prehistorical references, as well as psychology itself, I have a master's in a division of psychology that studies human behavior in the workplace. So it's neat for me to see this from not just a cadet, my title perspective, but also how the cadets interact with the academics, with the teachers, with the officers, because I see it as a living, breathing workplace. And so seeing what those dynamics, how they function or not, and what those relationships look like. It's really fascinating.
So, since you have a degree in psychology, does that mean you'll be putting the characters of Starfleet Academy on a couch and asking them how they feel?
You know, I get that question a lot, and I don't own a couch that's big enough for that, first of all. But secondly, it's more like, how can I, with my discipline, it's more so how can I help an individual do their job better? And that can be in terms of job satisfaction, that can be in terms of getting them the resources that they need to succeed, and also providing the training and the leadership development from the leadership side. Because as a lot of people know, any kind of change needs to come from the top down, but you need to listen to the bottom to be able to really get a good sense of what changes need to be made.
And hopefully, we'll have some admirals listening to the cadets in this series of Starfleet Academy.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Excellent. So, before we even get into the show itself, you and I were the beneficiaries of a new intro sequence celebrating 60 years of Star Trek. It showed a starship at warp, and the starship would change from one model to the next. And it really took me by surprise at first because I'd never seen this. I believe the ships, I'm going from memory here, were the original Kirk's Enterprise, the Enterprise A from the motion picture, the Enterprise D from Next Generation, the Defiant from Deep Space Nine, Voyager, the NX-01 from Enterprise, Discovery, the original Enterprise again, except now helmed by Christopher Pike, and then something new that we had never seen before. So these ships are not going in the chronological order of the Star Trek universe, in which case the NX-01 would have been first. Instead, it was going in the chronological order of their broadcast dates. So these are the ships that I grew up with in the order in which I grew up with them, which was very exciting to see. And that last ship, I was like, what is that? And it didn't take us long to find out, which we'll be discussing in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the very first episode, the premiere, the pilot, the debut of Starfleet Academy, that episode was called Kids These Days, directed by Alex Kurtzman and written by Gaia Violo. Aired January 15th, just like the second episode, which was also directed by Alex Kurtzman. We're going to talk first about Kids These Days, which opens with the setting being before the reformation of the Federation as we generally know it, but during or after the aftermath of something called the burn. Are you familiar with the burn?
I'm not. And so I'd really love to just get, a shortened version of what the burn is and when it appeared in the Star Trek timeline.
What did you infer the burn was from the context that this show gave us, which in my opinion, they could have given more?
Bad. The burn was bad. No, I my interpretation of it was that it was so impactful. It was maybe an explosion or supernova, and it destroyed the Starfleet Academy itself that was in San Francisco at the time, and then pretty much everything around it, and caused a whole bunch of chaos. And Starfleet, or excuse me, the Federation, really kind of cracked down into possibly even like a martial law sort of perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, the burn happened 120 years before Starfleet Academy, so about 800 years after Captain Picard.
Mm.
All Starfleet vessels, or all interstellar vessels really, are powered by dilithium. It's what enables most warp drives. It allows them to go faster than the speed of light.
Mm.
And on the day of the burn, all dilithium across the universe simultaneously exploded. So every starship that was powered by dilithium exploded. All the people on those ships died. And the survivors were left with no dilithium, which meant that they could not travel faster than light anymore. So this means that colonies, planets, Federation members that were light years apart were marooned from each other with no means of interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And so it would take years to get a message back and forth. And so people withdrew from the Federation because what was the point of being a part of a Federation when you were so distanced and out of reach of the other members or the homeworld? Even Earth withdrew from the Federation, Earth being one of the four founding members, along with Vulcans, Talaxians, and Andorians.
Mm.
So over the course of one of the other Star Trek shows that you haven't seen in the last 10 years, dilithium was restored. The source of the burn was identified. And now Starfleet is trying to reform the Federation and bring back the members that withdrew. And even those who are not rejoin the Federation are being given dilithium as almost an act of charity to say, we want you to be a spacefaring nation again. Here's how you do it. And if you want to join us, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the cause of the burn was discovered, and different aspects of the burn being repaired throughout the Federation. You know, the effects of that. Was that discussed in any of the series, or was that just kind of an understood part that we're starting out with?
It was the subject of the entire third season of Discovery.
Great. Now I know
And,
where to reference it.
and there were 5 seasons of Discovery, so that you can imagine there were 2 more seasons where they played out some aspects of that.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure. So let's start with the beginning of this episode, which is that it starts off with a little kid being torn away from his mother.
Mhm.
Is this what you were expecting for the opening of a show called Starfleet Academy?
It wasn't. I know that, having a hook at the very beginning to get interest is crucial for a lot of series, but this particular kind of spin on it it was surprising. It was surprisingly dark. It was surprisingly it pulled at my heartstrings. The animatronic bear was still creepy, not gonna lie. But when it came to the conversation between the mom and the child, and how desperate they were on the world that they were located at the time, that sort of desperation just really, really hit home for me. And it was, I think it really impacted or set the stage for the rest of that episode, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, I agree. This was a darker take on Star Trek, and it really shows what life was like after the burn, before the source of it was discovered 120 years later. We didn't really get to see too much of that in Star Trek Discovery. I haven't seen the Star Wars show Andor, but this felt more like a Star Wars opening than a Star Trek. And all of these observations are not criticisms, because like Starfleet Academy, I kind of was worried it would be a lot like Riverdale, I think is the name of it. The show with Archie Andrews
Archie.
and Jughead and etc.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah.
And I didn't really want a teen drama show. And so to instead see like, oh, Well, first of all, I also didn't realize that this show would have a main character. I thought it'd be an ensemble show.
Mm-hmm.
So to have the show focus on Caleb right from the beginning gave me a much better sense of, oh, this is what the show is about. This is the origin story. And then, they skip ahead. I think it was 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's like 21 years old, although he
Mm-hmm.
acts more like a teenager. And I'm eager to find out more about what happened in those 15 years. I'm sure it'll come out in flashbacks or in references, etc. But yeah, I thought it was a pretty effective opening.
Yeah, and really the only thing that we knew about Caleb with that 15 years was when he was being taken prisoner, and they were going through his criminal record. Like, a lot of kids who are just kind of diminished to what they've done versus who they are.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that really fascinating that, this started out as a very cold, uh, as you said, dark opening. And it is more akin to Star Wars in my mind. I'm more familiar with that universe. But having the introduction to him, it's, you want to feel some kind of connection to Caleb. But it's really hard to do that when he's being, when his life is being diminished down to just these are the criminal acts that he's done.
And we see a bit of that in the second episode, not to get too ahead of ourselves, but at one point somebody asks, "Who are you?" And he says, "Well, I'm Caleb." And they said, "No, I didn't ask your name. I asked, who are you?" But so often we reduce ourselves to who we are. And there was an episode of Star Trek Discovery where a character was asked, "How are you doing?" And somebody said, "Oh, I've been busy doing this." And they said, "No, I didn't ask what you were doing. I asked how you are doing."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, even now if people are saying how are you doing, it's kind of a perfunctory sort of statement. You're not really expected to say, well, actually I'm doing really poorly, or this is going on in my life. You're supposed to say I'm fine. It's more of that social grace. As you know, I help people with resumes, and so being able, like, seeing that criminal record, I think, is, to your point, having that kind of correlation with what is it that you've done versus who you are. It's very telling of how society does or does not accept a person.
Mhm. Yeah, it's very easy to paint them black and white.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One thing Caleb is a lost boy trying to find his mom. And I was a little disappointed to see that trope because very often these missing characters become, I don't know if you would call it a MacGuffin, like just an unseen object or a person that motivates the main character.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at the extreme, it would be women in refrigerators, which
Yeah.
is, when something happens to a woman to motivate a man, especially to go on a journey. This was also seen in the TV show Starman in the 1980s, which was based on a series of movies
Mm-hmm.
where the main character is just every episode, kind of like the Incredible Hulk was moving from place to place in the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
The Starman was moving from place to place, trying to keep ahead of the authorities and also looking for mom. And then they eventually find her and the show is over. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what role Caleb's mom will ultimately play in this show. It's too soon to say for sure.
Yeah, like having the mom or the female character being the climax of the show, of the series itself. How I Met Your Mother, and I've seen the Starman movie with Jeff Daniels, who was really great. But yeah, having that, like, it the only catalyst for any action or any movement in the series is trying to find, to your point, trying to find a lost boy, trying to find his mom.
Brief correction, it was Jeff Bridges, not Jeff Daniels.
Oh, excuse me. Yes, thank you. Big difference. I
If it,
appreciate that.
if it was a small difference, I wouldn't have said anything. But
No, and just disclaimer, I will do that throughout this throughout this podcast.
because you're great with faces, but a little less so with names.
That's exactly it. Hey, it
Okay.
was Jeff, and I know that the dude abides. I get all that, but yes. So yeah, I know who it is. It's just the name.
Let's skip ahead a little bit. We find him, he's in a ship. He takes it over to try to find his mom. He gets arrested. Uh, Admiral Ake finds him because she's been looking for him for decades. She resigned from Starfleet in order to find him. She
Mhm.
finds him. She recruits him, says, "Come to Starfleet Academy with me because I'm going to be the headmaster or the chancellor of the school." It was not immediately familiar to me, the context in which she was inviting him to accompany her. I didn't realize he was going to be a student. Did you get that?
I don't think he really realized that either, and I didn't. But I kind of inferred that from what she was saying, and um, and also just one question that this brings up for me when you were mentioning that she said that she had looked for him every day. If he had a criminal record that spanned multiple, you see these different symbols, so they surpass multiple different kinds of authority uh, organizations. Why? How could she not find him? So that was just a question that I had for myself. But yeah, when it came to Starfleet Academy, I, her being asked um, by Charlie to become the chancellor, and then her mentioning to Caleb that he can find her mom, or excuse me, he can find his mom through Holly Hunter. I assume that's what she meant by it, but I don't think he picked up on it.
It's funny to hear you call one of the characters Charlie because I've only ever known him as Admiral Vance.
Oh, yeah, she called him Charlie, and so that's what I wrote down. And I mean, but I only know him from the Mummy movies. So, because archaeology, of course, I'm going to watch the Mummy movies.
And that puts you on a first name basis. So Charlie.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So
We're
Charles
buds
Vance,
now.
Charles Vance is who we're talking about. He is a character from Star Trek Discovery who is appearing here as well. I'm guessing the reason they weren't able to find him despite his criminal history is because having been charged with a crime is not the same as having been arrested for that crime. And I think
That's
this was the
true.
first time he had been arrested.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
Mhm. The first time I realized that he was a student at Starfleet Academy was when Laura Thok told him to get down and give me some push-ups.
Put him on the vomit monitor.
And I think that's one of the first times that he realized that he was a student. And also, can I just say how much I love the character of Laura Thok?
Yeah, she's very scary and very admirable.
And she also holds so dearly the culture of both of her parents. She is half Klingon, half Jem'Hadar. You probably are familiar with Klingons. Jem'Hadar, for what it's worth, is a race that we've only ever really seen in Deep Space Nine, and they are not a naturally occurring species. They were genetically engineered from the ground up to be slaves and soldiers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of things click, actually. That tracks.
Yeah. So the fact that they now still exist 800 years later and are reproducing on their own implies a level of agency that we've never seen from this species before.
Mm,
It's also right about then that we have the opening ceremony for Starfleet Academy, which at this point is still on a starship. It's on its way in transit to Earth.
mhm.
And as part of those opening ceremonies, we do see a wall of, for many people, what are very familiar names of Star Trek characters from many other series.
Yeah. So even 800 years later, I recognize a lot of, Admiral, or excuse me, Ambassador Spock and Data. I was a little disappointed that his cat Spot didn't get his own line in that, but a lot of familiar names. And I think that we were when I first saw it, I was like, this is 800 years in the future. Like nobody else has come in between that time. But of course, it's more for the fans. I totally get that.
Yeah, this is definitely fan service. And to your point, I've always wondered, are these ships that we see on TV, are they famous because there are shows about them, or are there shows about them because they're famous?
Mm.
Like there are documentaries about high school science fairs, and the documentary always follows the person who comes in first. How did they know they were going to come in first? It's because they followed six other kids to hedge their bets, and then they delete the other five.
Yeah, and
So
then what happens to those other five?
Right. So think of all the Star Trek shows that they filmed and which we never saw because the ships didn't do anything interesting.
Yeah, maybe that's what happened in the last 4 years. We just
See,
have very uninteresting ships that we filmed.
the last 4 years?
Yeah, well, in the last 800 years, but
Oh,
you said that there was 4 years until this series came out.
did I? Oh,
Mhm.
since Strange New Worlds.
Right.
But Strange New Worlds is set like 1,000 years before this series.
Oh, well, then 1,000 years of very uninteresting ships. Uh, yeah, I'm a little skeptical about that.
Some names I want to mention here are Lieutenant Nog. There is a USS Nog in Starfleet because the actor who played Nog passed away a few years ago. Cedo Jaxa, a character who appeared on 2 episodes of The Next Generation, including one that my mom and I just saw that had Wesley Crusher in Starfleet Academy. Natasha Yar also died in the line of service. Lieutenant Julian Bashir from Deep Space Nine. Wesley Crusher from multiple series. Commander Zero the Third. I don't know necessarily what the third refers to, but but Zero was a character on Star Trek Prodigy,
Mm.
and this is, I think, the first non-Prodigy reference to a Prodigy character, which is exciting to see. Harry Kim from Star Trek Voyager, who was derided for decades for having never once been promoted in the 7 years of the show, apparently eventually made it to Admiral. Made it to Admiral Harry Kim. It was very exciting. Philippa Georgiou from Discovery, but also at least two names that are real life people. One was Admiral Tawny Newsome. Tawny Newsome is the actor who played the main character on Star Trek Lower Decks, and she is also co-producer of Starfleet Academy and co-writer of one of the upcoming episodes.
Hmm.
And also Admiral Kristen Beyer. Kristen Beyer is also a Star Trek author. She has written many books, including based on Star Trek Voyager. So these two real life people, Tawny Newsome and Kristen Beyer, are now technically characters in the Star Trek universe.
That's great. I love the kind of cross reference with that.
Yeah, that was neat. And then we get to see other characters who are in the incoming class of Starfleet Academy, the first class in like 80 years or so. And some of them introduce themselves coyly, others kindly, others shyly, and some with bullying, which I thought humanity had evolved beyond at this point.
Yeah, it kind of takes me to the point in the show or in this particular episode that I like to call bullies and bird watchers. That's what I have it as in my notes. But yeah, I mean, one thing that it reminded me of is, just kind of reflecting on, we all have had our first day of school or work or whatever, and trying to figure out not just our own place, but where everybody else fits. And having this uh the Darum is his first name that I saw, but having him just kind of show up and be like, I'm the bully. And it's fairly obvious because of what he's doing with Krog's binoculars.
Mm-hmm. Gene Roddenberry would definitely say that humanity's evolved beyond that. He did not want Star Trek to be a show about internal conflict, which is why the cast of, not just the cast, but also the crew of The Next Generation got along so well.
Mm.
That was largely abandoned after he died. If you look at Deep Space Nine, you saw Julian Bashir hitting on Jadzia Dax and her rebuffing those approaches and attempts. So that would never have happened had he still been alive. Deep Space Nine was the first Star Trek to be created entirely from the ground up after his passing. And his lack of genetics in that show showed. Not necessarily for the worse. I think a lot of people think Deep Space Nine was the best Star Trek show ever, including myself. But it was a little cliche to have that bullying show up.
Yeah, and show up so obviously and so early, but also, the art imitating life. There's certainly been times where just having the first impression with someone and saying, oh, I can see that this person has this kind of propensity. Positive, negative, neutral. But I think that also for the sake of the show, because first episode, we're trying to learn who everybody is, where everybody fits, and they only have so much time to cram in. This is what each person's personality is. That might be another factor in this.
That's a good point. One factor contributing to that also might be that it used to be a season of Star Trek was 22 episodes. Now it is 10.
Yeah, there's a lot to cram in there.
Yeah. So when you have 22 episodes, you can have filler moments or character moments where Data tries to grow a beard or asks Worf to pat sit for him and stuff like that. And there's literally no room for that. There's no time for that anymore. So you have to move fast. You don't have as much opportunity to characterize, but also portraying this character as a bully gives us the opportunity, the audience, to consider just what you were talking about earlier about reducing a person to what they are. Is this person a bully because he pulls away somebody's binoculars? And does that make us casting the characters as black and white? And what opportunities are there for that character to evolve in our perspective in the span of only 10 episodes?
Yeah. And I think that he does redeem himself at least a little bit as we're going through the first episode, which we'll get to. But, that first impression, the difficulty that I see with, to your point, the series that kind of condenses itself into 10 episodes is there's a lot of fast understandings that need to be made. And so that in itself reduces any kind of nuance for a lot of personalities. And so I see a lot of more of the stereotypical personalities come through simply because there's just not enough time to build those nuances, as you said. So there's no Klingons to ask to babysit my cat, So
right.
Yeah, it makes a big difference.
Gotta do what we can. They are now on their way to Earth in the Starfleet Academy vessel, which is the Athena. Great name for an Academy ship. And they allow themselves to be diverted into the Cardassian Badlands because they pick up some anomalous signals, and they say, oh, this will be a great lab for one of our classes. And I'm thinking to myself, class hasn't even started yet. How can they be doing labs already? They want to do like a harmonics lab. It's like, they're looking for excuses to be ambushed at this point.
It's to further the plot.
I know. So they end up getting attacked by the Venari Ral, which I don't think was clearly defined, is a band of marauders.
Yeah, I think the creepy animatronic bear calls Nusbraka at the beginning pirate. And so that's what gives it the kind of concept. And for me, having the very limited experience that I have with the Star Trek universe, anything that shines green, like the Borg cube, is probably not good. So seeing the backlight of these three pieces that combine into the ship having this green hue, I was like, oh, that's probably not a good thing.
No.
Pointy green stuff is not good in this universe.
No, cactuses and Venari Ral.
Yeah. I mean, same thing, just as dangerous.
Yeah. Ways that nature says do not touch. So they get attacked by the Venari Ral. The ship becomes encased in programmable matter. Transporters seem to be offline. I don't know if you noticed this, Stacy, but transporters have changed a lot since the era of Picard. Did you see how they use transporters on this show?
The only thing that I saw was that the transporter, as you said, was offline. So I didn't really see how it was supposed to work. And if they did use that before, I missed it. The only thing that I saw that had really any effect is when Caleb walked through the one shield and poof, he had Federation haircut.
Yeah, that was certainly a very special kind of transporter. But in general, transporters are now built right into the comm badges. So you don't need to go to a transporter room. You can just instantly blink yourself from the bridge down to engineering without using a turbo lift at all.
Okay.
Yeah. So there were occasional instances where that did happen. Like at one point when the Venari Ral, they beamed onto the Athena. And at one moment, that's an empty corridor, and the next moment, boom, there's like 5 people, including like a giant beetle guy, just walking down the hallway.
Yeah, the beetle guy. That's the one who got my attention.
Yeah. So that was them beaming in. It's not a slow process where they slowly dissipate out and there's not a hum effect. It's just like, whoom, and there they are.
Not the particleized sort of setup. Got it.
Which on TNG was done by pouring sparkles. Like remember like when you're a kid and you're playing with crafts, and you put down some glue and then you put down some sparkles.
Uh-huh.
I think that's what they're called, or glitter. I'm sorry, glitter.
Yeah, that never gets out of your house ever again.
Again, no. So with TNG, they would pour glitter into a glass of water, swirl it around, and then overlay that onto the person for the transporter effect. Yep, that was it. So anyway, so transporters were offline, which is why they're all saying, everybody run, run. And they're like trying to get them up the stairs and blah, and blah. And they come up with a plan. This attack was all because Caleb was trying to find his mom and trying to use the Athena comp sequence or communicators to try to find her. And the Venari Rawl picked up on that. And now they have to come up with a plan to defeat him. And these kids, these Starfleet Academy first-year students, they seem to know a lot about like everything.
Yeah, I was kind of like, you haven't even started school. And I know that Genesis, who is a really great character, she grew up with, like, her dad was an admiral in Starfleet. So, knowing more than a lot of other folks, but being able, and Caleb, I guess he was the Venari Rawl, he was using one of their old frequencies, and that's how they caught on to that. But just the fact that he's like, oh, I know programmable matter. Just let me do my thing over here. And he seemed to know a lot more than a student level, than my student level as a cadet.
Right. As you said, Genesis had a reason, and Caleb, of course, had lived on the Lam for so long. But everybody else, like whether it was the Klingon cadet performing emergency surgery, or whether it was Darum, who is the bully who took the binoculars. He's a Khionian. He's the first, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Khionian to enlist in Starfleet Academy. Sorry, according to Memory Alpha, we have never seen Khionians before. They're brand new for this series. So I was unfamiliar with his ability to turn gray and walk out into space and not freeze for 8 minutes. Like this was all just a very convenient race to have on the ship at that moment.
And I also thought it was very convenient that he changed because, one thing that I've picked up on with Starfleet Academy is that, they're really respectful of the individual and the heritage that each person brings. But the fact that he looked like a human, what was the phrase that the doctor used, which I love Robert Picardo just in little bits I've seen, organics. Him, as he just kept showing himself as an organic that looked like a human, as opposed to embracing his Khionian or Khionian self from the very beginning. And I just think that was probably to save budget for makeup. But
yeah, I mean, he is organic. He's not cybernetic, as far as I can tell. But you're right. I don't know why he has 2 forms. I don't know why he relies on one instead of the other. There's a lot for us to learn about this race, and that is what Star Trek is all about: is going to strange new worlds and seek out new civilizations. And here's one right here in Starfleet Academy.
Yeah, it's very Mystique from X-Men sort of homage.
Ooh, that's a very good point. I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. Yeah. So there are a lot of characters we haven't talked about yet, and we will catch up to those, but we also want to keep this episode fairly trim. They eventually make it to Earth. Is there anything else before they get to Earth that you want to talk about? Anything else that happened like during the siege or whatever?
I really love the interaction between Captain Ake, so Holly Hunter, and Nosbraka, so Paul Giamatti's character, just how they kind of banter. One thing that I really love about Ake and Holly Hunter as an actor herself is just like, she's so soft spoken, but so badass at the same time. And she, she's the kind of character that will just sit in the chair and read, kind of like how I'm sitting, I sit in the chair the same way. And she walks around barefoot and she's drinking from other people's glasses that she doesn't even know. And, being able to have these kinds of interactions with people, I think is really telling of the kind of fortitude that she has, that she doesn't need a loud voice or any kind of external display of power to be able to own.
That is a very good point. There is this running gag in the last few years of Star Trek of what's the captain's catchphrase going to be? What are they going to say to make the ship go? Is it going to be engage? And in this case, I can't even remember what she said because all I remember is the way she was sitting in the chair. She was just like curled up sideways with her feet on the chair. And I was like, oh, this is just somebody who makes herself at home. And I think part of that is due to her being a Lanthanite. She's actually human Lanthanite. But Lanthanite is something that I think we've only seen once before in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. There is a character there named Pelia, who is played by Carol Kane, who you may recall from The Princess Bride.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lanthanites live for hundreds, if not thousands of years, but otherwise look almost entirely human.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is a character, Holly Hunter, who has lived for over 400 years. And you'd never know it from looking at her because she must moisturize.
Yeah. I think she's got a really good skincare regimen down.
Yeah,
so yeah,
must.
and and to your point, I don't really know what her catchphrase is too. That pop culture reference. I do remember that being a big, kind of a big thing. But she does say, "Let's go to San Francisco." Like that was really what she said when she's sitting, very comfy yet awkwardly in that chair. So I don't know if "let's go to" is part of her catchphrase or if this was a one-off because, they're just going to San Francisco. But yeah, it just her presence is really enjoyable to watch.
And we do learn something about her, which is that she lost a son in the burn 120 years ago, which is a downside to long-lived species that I hadn't really considered before, is that you're spending the rest of your life thinking about this loss, about what could have been done differently, which she has, and how old that kid would be now. And so it really helps us understand her affinity for Caleb.
Yeah. And Caleb even points out, "I'm not your son." And she says, "I'm aware," so she knows this isn't the same situation, but she still feels that wound from 120 years ago.
Yeah, very much so.
Mm-hmm.
There were a couple of other new species to me. One is, well, not just to me, but to Star Trek, Klingerite. At one point, I'm sorry, what's the pirate's name?
So Nusbraka, he's part Klingon and part Tellurite.
Tellurite.
Yeah, Tellurite.
Yeah, not to be confused with the Colorado city of Telluride.
Yeah, no, that wasn't, or the car.
Yeah, when he said that, I didn't know what he meant, but then I looked it up and I was like, oh, we've never seen one of those before. And also the young cadet Genesis, her father is an admiral and he is Dar-Sha, which is the race. I, again, checked Memory Alpha. There is no wiki entry for Dar-Sha because we've never heard that before. We don't know what it means.
Well, and I think it's very surprising how casually, so it must have been something that happened or, a race that came up within the last 800 years, but was so acclimated to Starfleet that her casually mentioning, "Oh, my dad's Dar-Sha." And so of course I grew up going from place to place within Starfleet. I'm curious what that affiliation is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. As long as we're talking about characters, one of your favorites is Sam.
I love Sam. Yeah, Sam is my favorite photonic. The series acclamation mill.
What do you like about Sam so much?
So I really love her innocence, and she says that she's programmed to be 17, but she's only lived for, I think, just a few months on Krag, and then being able to be so, she's so eager to make friends and to to have this experience of being a life form. And she tries so hard, and I just really feel for her because I have that awkwardness in me too, and how Genesis just really picks up on that and helps with those social cues, like how do you shake a hand? And when the programmable matter was taking over the ship and the emergency lights weren't working, Sam just put her hand on the wall and everything lit up, and she just was casually able to say like hi. And also her conversation with the doctor was really funny when he was trying to recruit students to join the opera club.
Yeah, I think a lot of people who watch Star Trek will, over one series or another, empathize with a character who doesn't get social cues. For example, Data in The Next Generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we see some of that with Sam, and I'm glad to see that diversity and that representation in this show.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't really seen her be photonic in a sense that we're familiar with, like solid objects passing through her, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only been a few episodes, and we haven't really gotten to see her in the spotlight just yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm really interested to see what her personality is like, how she develops. I took a child development class in undergrad way back when, and so being able to kind of see how she develops, not just as that awkward teen, but also as a child. She's trying things out and she's being curious, and that is really, in my mind, that's going to take her really far. Like Data, she has a really great, open hearted sort of personality, and that will take her really far in this series, I think.
Yeah, I agree. If she was on Captain Planet, she would be the person with the heart power.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
And of course, speaking of photonics, there is Robert Picardo as the Doctor.
Yes. So I was familiar with Robert Picardo a little bit because Ken, you had me watch a couple of episodes where he was in it. And then also just, I really like the pop culture reference of the Doctor. And Ken, you had me watch a couple of episodes. And so I can get a better understanding of that dry humor, that wit, that kind of snarky personality, which I guess he really kind of owned and progressed through the series that he was on.
Yeah, one of the episodes of Voyager I had you watch was Living Witness, which I didn't know much about Starfleet Academy. I purposely avoided all trailers, any information I could find. I unfortunately did find out that Robert Picardo would be on the show. I wish that had been a surprise to me. But I wondered, how is a character from 900 years ago on this show? I mean, holograms don't necessarily age, so it's entirely possible it's the same one. But the episode Living Witness, was set 800 years after Voyager. And it had a version of the Doctor be awakened after 800 years of stasis and set off to find Earth. And so it seemed very likely to me that he woke up from that stasis in time to be on Starfleet Academy, and that this would be that version of him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We learned that it is not. This is, in fact, the version of the Doctor that was on Voyager.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the ways we know that, two things. He said he added an aging module to his programming 500 years ago.
Very clever.
Yeah, if this had been the Living Witness version of him, he was in stasis back then.
Right.
But also, Sam says, like, you're the Doctor from Voyager, and you helped these other characters. And the characters she mentions are from Star Trek Prodigy.
Okay, I was going to ask about that because when she mentioned Gwendolyn, Captain Gwendolyn, he turns around and Sam is like, "Your sensitivity characteristics are spiking. Like, what is going on with that?" And you get to see kind of his effect of her doing this name dropping.
Some people consider, well, first of all, Prodigy only ran for 2 seasons. And some people consider the second season of Prodigy to be the finest season of Star Trek ever told.
Mm-hmm.
It was a show that should have run for many more seasons. It didn't end on a cliffhanger, thankfully, but there were nonetheless more stories to be told by that cast and crew. And we may find out some of them from the Doctor.
Mm.
Yeah. Speaking of which, there was a moment in, I think, the second episode where a giant red rock character is walking down the halls.
Yeah. And you had reacted to that. And I was like, I'm just going to wait to see what this is about.
So that was a Brikar or Brikar character,
Mhm.
Brikar. We've only ever seen one of those before, and it was one of the main characters on Star Trek Prodigy. So
Mhm.
this is the first time outside an animated series that we've seen a member of that species. So the fact that we have characters from Prodigy on the Wall of Fame being mentioned by Sam to the Doctor, and that
Mhm.
race walking down the hall means that Prodigy is absolutely canon in ways that we've never seen before, because this is the first new Star Trek show to air since Prodigy went off the air.
Mm. Mhm.
And since I liked that show so much, it was really impactful for me to see these things.
Mm. Yeah, and that'll be really. I'd like to see what kind of experience I'm going to have. Knowing all these things and seeing this kind of from the Starfleet Academy side, and then eventually, of course, going back and watching everything, all 900 episodes, 60 years worth of Star Trek, but being able to see the context of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's going to be fun if you ever decide to do that. We also, to wrap up this episode of Starfleet Academy, we see the characters finally arrive in San Francisco. Music is being played, sung by Rufus Wainwright, and I had a very strong reaction to this.
I noticed, and the fact that the original version of this song was an anti-war cry, and it was a response to the hippie movement in the 60s, and Rufus Wainwright coming in and of course just owning it because he's Rufus Wainwright and I just love him, but being able to have that kind of experience in this sort of slow motion song, and looking over at you as we're watching these together and seeing your reaction, it was really heartfelt and really fascinating, and I really want to know what was going through your mind with that.
I'm naturally somebody who is very empathetic in movies. Am the guy who will walk out of the theater and other theater goers on their way out will say to me, "You were so much fun to watch," because they could just see me reacting to the movie and hear me. And also, Star Trek The Universe just hits really close to home for me. And we've never seen a Star Trek series set on Earth. Individual episodes, yeah, but not a whole series. This is
Mm.
brand new for Starfleet
Mhm.
Academy to be doing that. And also, Earth, like I said, over the course of the burn, they departed from the Federation and now they're back. And to see San Francisco like this was almost like a homecoming.
Mhm.
And also, it was a symbol of hope for not only everything that the Star Trek universe has been through, but also everything that we're going through. Like,
Mm.
will San Francisco be there in 800 years? Will we be there in 800
Mhm.
years? Like, at the rate we're going, I don't know. I don't have a lot of confidence or optimism right now. And so for everybody to have made it there, not only the crew, but also us as viewers, was an act of hope.
Yeah, I can definitely see that, that juxtaposition of where we are now and where we would be in 800 years. And when we were watching the slow motion, or the footage of the Golden Gate Bridge, one thing I know that I noticed was that it has the net, that was put in place on January 1st, 2024, to help people, to give people hope, and for who are contemplating ending their own lives. And so, having that, the net underneath the bridge, um, having that symbol of hope in itself, because that was the presentation that the city of San Francisco had for that. And as you're saying, when it comes to, not having a lot of hope right now, but there is a little bit. And, is that like parallel to Star Wars hope? Doesn't really matter, but having that last throughout the 800 years and the return of the academy to San Francisco. Like I said, like coming home. I could see that.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a very optimistic, hopeful moment. And I felt that also it was a very fitting end for the episode and that this was a very strong pilot. I mean, we talk about how if the next generation nowadays were to air, it would be canceled after the first season because it was so bad. And especially Encounter at Farpoint was not a strong debut for the first new Star Trek series live action in almost 20 years. But Starfleet Academy, I thought this pilot, this first episode, was really strong.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that it really, this isn't just like a Dawson's Creek sort of situation. You're really seeing not just the interaction between the students, but also the interaction between the students and the instructors, the commanders, and then themselves, the older adults, and whether they're 80, 800, doesn't really matter. But seeing, I think that the way that they structured this series can pull in both, young, old, new, seasoned fans, because it really shows different types of relationships and the intersection of those relationships within each other.
Yeah, I've never seen Dawson's Creek, but I get the reference. This is not going to just be a high school teen drama. This is going to be where we see the future of the Federation being formed. Like since the school is a ship, they have the opportunity to go out there and see history being made. And also history is going to come to them and be made. So this is a very exciting time and place for the future of Star Trek. And I'm very glad that we are there.
Yeah. And to see like what going back to your statement about hope, the one thing that I can hope for is the younger generation doing better than we did, always improving. And I think that's the impetus of the Starfleet Academy. It's the first class to be back. And so the ability, the ingenuity, the innovation, the abilities that the younger generation can open up those strange new worlds and can open up the communication within the different species, the different races, so that they can rebuild these connections that were lost during the burn, or even just because of time and bad decisions from other generations.
So that means we have one more episode to go in this episode of this podcast. I think this one will be faster because now we know the characters. We don't need to introduce them all, nor do we need to introduce the cast of this very podcast. So let's go ahead and talk about episode 2, Beta Test. Very clever play on words, because this is where we see the Betazoids from the planet Betazed come to Starfleet Academy to negotiate rejoining the Federation. We have an isolationist president, sound familiar, and his 2 kids, one of whom is very attracted to Caleb, coincidentally, and they get into sorts of shenanigans like teenagers are going to do, although they're not teenagers. He's 21, but he acts like a teenager, so maybe my math is wrong. I don't know. A couple of things right off the bat. We got Stephen Colbert in the cast of Starfleet Academy as the voice of the digital dean. We never see him. We only hear him.
Yeah, he did just a little blip on the first episode, enough to warrant his name as a featured actor. But this is where we really hear him say a lot of different types of statements that are, of course, hilarious. And so, yeah, I love that he's the digital dean of students.
Yeah, from Lord of the Rings to Star Trek, he's been in it all. And the reason we know that it's him is because this episode was the first time we got to see the actual intro to Starfleet Academy, the title sequence. I don't remember seeing that in the first episode. And it was a lovely metaphor about things growing, whether it's plants or children or buildings, etc.
Yeah, I really love the allegory of the cherry tree. It's supposed to be a lot of times in traditions, it represents just that symbol of hope, of rebirth, of regeneration and respect, as well as it can be used as an homage to those who have passed before us. And so being able to pull from those different traditions, be it Japanese or other traditions, and have that, I think that it's a good symbolism for what's going on at the academy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a long history of horticulture at Starfleet Academy, and we see that recognized when the episode opens in Boothby Memorial Park.
Yeah. So when that opened, who is the namesake on that?
So Mr. Boothby was the groundskeeper at Starfleet Academy. He was born around 2260, and he was there when Captain Picard was a student at Starfleet Academy. Picard himself said he might not have made it through Starfleet Academy if it hadn't been for Boothby's guidance. He was sort of the grounds sage in addition to being the groundskeeper.
Mm-hmm.
So he was not a faculty member, but he was probably the wisest person there. He was played by the actor Ray Walston, who was also known for the TV show Picket Fences. Ray Walston also appeared as Boothby on Star Trek Voyager, and he passed away in the year 2001. But Boothby was the groundskeeper not only when Picard was a student, but also when Wesley Crusher was a student, like an entire generation later. So he was a very long-lived individual there, and apparently his effect on people was, or on students, his support of them was well known. I keep bouncing between the actor and the character. Going back to the actor, Ray Walston, he was also in the movies South Pacific, the musical, The Apartment with Jack Lemmon, The Sting with Robert Redford and Paul Newman, and Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Yeah, having I have watched some of those movies, not all of them, but having somebody who has that kind of acting background be playing, I find it fascinating that he's playing a janitor, in the series, and going back to the kind of reminiscing of my experience in public school and or just in general, just education in general, whatever that would look like for anybody. There's really something to be said about the one person who makes such a big impact. They may not be the most impactful. They may not have the most impactful title, but to what you were saying with the wisdom that he showed to the students and the impact that he had on Picard. I think that it's really nice to hear that that kind of backstory.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not the sort of reference that people need to know to understand the episode, but the fact that they took a moment to prominently feature that sign was nice. This is also where we saw that Brikar character that I mentioned earlier, and then also we have several characters get into a turbo lift and try to avoid a conversation with the doctor about mucus. And one of the characters in that turbo lift is an Exocomp, which is a little robotic character that debuted on Star Trek The Next Generation. It was one of those Data Geordi episodes where they're trying to figure out what's going on in engineering, and the Exocomps are there. Now, Stacy, since you prefer to watch the TV show with captions on or subtitles,
Yeah.
we picked up on something that would otherwise not be known, which is the name of that Exocomp character. Almond Basket.
I love it. Yeah. So you thanks to my my history of not wearing earplugs at rock concerts and being hard having a little bit of impacted hearing, needing to have the closed captioning on. I would have never guessed that would have been the name. But I do love how Captain Ake names all of you said they were exocoms. All the robots as she's going down the hallway. I don't know if you noticed that. She remembers everybody's name. And Almond Basket certainly being a standout.
Well, there are multiple robots here. There is the dots, which have like heads and arms, and they float down the corridor. And she says hi to them like, "Hi, Stanley," etc. I don't think she said hello to the Exocomp, which is smaller, rounder, and floats.
Yeah.
But that guy was named Almond Basket, and I looked them up on Memory Alpha, And Almond Basket made noises, which means that they had a voice actor. And the voice actor also played the only other named Exocomp in Star Trek history, Peanut Hamper.
Can you imagine seeing the CV of this person and having these characters just trying to get the next role? And I love that they didn't just feed some kind of code into a computer and have that generate the voices. Like it's an actual voice actor. I really appreciate that.
I don't know to what degree, if any, AI is being used in the production of Star Trek, but I'm glad that you're right. It wasn't just a computer voice, it was a human voice.
Yeah, voice actors for the win.
Yeah. So this episode is broadly, as I said, about Betazed being lured back into Starfleet, and this negotiation is happening between Admiral Vance and the president of Betazed, happening right at Starfleet Academy, because Betazed has set up a psionic wall, not only around their own planet, but around several other affiliated planets, all of which would join the Federation of Betazed did. And
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what a psionic wall is. I mean, Betazeds have telepathic abilities, but I don't know what a psionic wall is. They say nothing can get in or out, and yet clearly Betazed has heard that Starfleet is reforming, so news gets in and out. It was a little unclear to me just what this is and how it works. And maybe we don't need to know.
Yeah, I'm not really sure if we need to know. I mean, is it like the wall on, I don't know, season 5 of Stranger Things, where you don't really understand what it is for the first several episodes? But I think that the main thing that I got from it was it reinforces the isolationist presidency of the Betazoid community, and also their effect on neighboring worlds or galaxies. And it's as we talked about for the last episode, it's I see a lot of parallels with what we're going through today and how that could be affected.
Sort of like NATO, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. There was something I should have intuited much sooner in this episode, but I didn't, and I'll explain why. The president of Betazed is deaf.
Yes.
Which is why all the characters who were communicating with him were using sign language.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the reason I didn't know that is because of something that we didn't really see a lot of in this episode. We saw that some of the characters were empathetic and could sense other people's feelings, but historically, empathy has been the so-called superpower of people who are only partially Betazed, or Betazoid rather.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, people who are fully Betazoid can actually read people's minds. And we didn't really see that. We didn't see specific thoughts being read here. And I don't know if that was a sign of respect for people's privacy or if their powers have diluted over the last 1,000 years or so.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason I thought they were using sign language is because on a planet that is entirely telepathic and can read thoughts, what need is there for spoken language? And so I thought they just never developed it. And that's why they were using sign language.
And that might be what the purpose of that was. But forgive me, the Betazed character who Caleb is enamored by has those enhanced capabilities. And I know that we don't discover that until later, but being able to have these different kinds of levels of how powerful is the empathy or even the telepathic abilities. But I wasn't aware of that. So that's really great information.
Yeah, Tarima Sadal is the daughter who falls in love with Caleb, if that's not exaggerating things. And in Wikipedia, she's not listed as a guest or as a recurring character. She's listed as a main character. So that does imply that we will be seeing her again. And we'll find out what that neural inhibitor is. She said that she feels things more intensely than other people. And if it were not for the inhibitor, other people could get hurt. We don't know what that means. It could be kind of like Sarek, Spock's father, who had a condition where his emotions were projected onto other people. Or no, I'm sorry, he experienced emotions, but they could be projected onto another person as a container, a receptacle, if you will, which is what
Kind of
Picard
like a
volunteered to
vessel.
do. Exactly, yes.
Hmm.
So I don't know, maybe she causes other people to feel things. Maybe because empathy is usually about uh taking, but what if you start giving as well? I don't know. I'm just spitballing here.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are all really great points. And I think that, mentioning the neuroinhibitor, definitely foreshadowing, you know, either something's going to get hijacked or it's going to be affected in a way where I would be surprised if we don't get to see what those capabilities are going to be in a later episode.
Right. Oh yeah. I mean, it's Chekhov's gun, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. We also see these two young brats in love, which is so obnoxious. I mean, I don't mind it because it's age appropriate. I'm not complaining with that at all. Like it feels very much in character. And the way they eventually devolve into a spat at the end, I was like, oh my God, you guys are taking things way too personally. Why don't you just sit down and talk like adults? And the reason is because you're not adults. Okay.
Right.
But
Hormones.
but they do go to what could be an aquarium, could be cetaceous ops. I don't know, but they see whales, and she says one of the whales is pregnant,
Hmm.
which is a callback to Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home, where Spock leapt into an aquarium tank to swim with whales and found out that one of them was pregnant.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, I didn't know that that was kind of a callback. So having these little Easter eggs or these little blips of references of past series is really great to know. And I think they were underneath the school goes down the bay, and so you can see the further down in the bay, the water and the humpback whales are coming up to those windows in at where that room is in the bay.
That makes sense because you may not know this, but by the era of Captain Kirk, whales on Earth were extinct.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So I wonder if they're are do they were they extinct and then they were regenerated like Jurassic Park style or
They were regenerated, but not Jurassic Park style. There's a whole movie about it.
oh great.
And it's one of the best Star Trek movies.
Are you going to tell me which one it is?
Star
Which
Trek
one?
IV, The Voyage Home.
Okay, there we go. All
Yeah.
right. Yes, the
Yeah,
one where Spock's jumping into yeah, I get it.
yeah. So Star Trek IV and Star Trek VIII are both set entirely on Earth, San Francisco and Bozeman, Montana, respectively.
Mm.
And those are two of my favorite Star Treks, the ones where it might as well be called Earth Trek.
Yeah, and you've
Or
been to both places.
I have, like, yeah, I went to Bozeman, which is home to the country's oldest computer museum, but it is nowhere near as wooded as what we see in Star Trek VIII because Star Trek VIII was filmed in Arizona.
Good to know.
Yeah. Oh well. So we see these kids, we see the whales, we see the Golden Gate Bridge, we see sign language, we see the doctor singing opera, which we know he loves because he was recruiting people in the first episode.
Hmm.
And the opera is a metaphor because the opera is being performed while negotiations are ongoing. And basically, whatever happens on the negotiating stage also happens in the opera and vice versa.
Yeah, you can kind of see the emotions go, up and down, and the same with the conversations. I will say that with the sign language, I appreciate that the sign for shame is still the same 800 years later because that's what the son was doing to the daughter when she was passing by Caleb with stars in her eyes, of course. But yeah, having that parallel, I think the words. This is a race that has such a hold on empathy and feelings. And opera being performed in foreign languages, it's about the feeling. It's not necessarily about what's being said. It's about how you say it. And so I think that it's a really beautiful parallel to show how these conversations are going and falling apart with the opera where the focus of the opera is how you're feeling.
Yeah, it was a wonderful parallel to what was happening on stage and a great opportunity for Robert Picardo to show off his capabilities and remind us just what the Doctor is capable of.
Yeah, yeah.
So the negotiations fail for reasons that I didn't quite grok. Like Chancellor Ake said something at the party, and then the president steps in really close to her and says negotiations are over. And I'm like, I didn't think it was that offensive, but okay. And then they bring him back to the negotiating table and offer to build the new Starfleet headquarters, not in Paris, but on Betazed. And I loved how surprised and moved the president was by this. Like the emotion was very well acted.
Yeah, yeah, and it was such a I think it was such a new twist on what each of what the Admiral Vance, my buddy Charlie, and what the Betazoid president brought to the table originally. Like it was a whole new idea. Because the president was saying, we want this many seats, we want this much voting power, we want all these different things. And Vance is saying, well, this is a democracy. We can only offer so many different things. And then here comes this whole new idea of putting the headquarters in at Betazoid. And so being able to have these new ideas and like you were saying before, I'm not really sure what kind of nerve Captain Ake hit with the president when he just completely shut it down. But yeah, he was very visibly upset by what she had said.
What do you think about building Starfleet headquarters on Betazed?
Having it be on Betazed, it's a very clever way for them to open the wall. But I do think, they're trying, the Federation is really trying to make amends for connections and relationships that they had lost over so many years and centuries. And I do think that this is a pretty big olive branch that they're providing. And being able to have this on Betazed will give the Betazoids the respect that they're wanting, because in my mind, that's what they want. They want, and more so than just power, they want respect. And being able to provide that to them in this way, I think is pretty is very unique, but very impactful.
Maybe I'm a little too anthrocentric, but the idea of Starfleet headquarters being anywhere but Earth chafed at me a bit.
Tell me more about that.
I mean, not to the point where I'm going to protest it, because it's clearly a wise move to rebuild the Federation. It's going to bring in so many Federation worlds. It's going to demonstrate that this really is an inclusive society.
Mm-hmm.
But, as much as I value diversity, equality, and inclusion, I think not sometimes. I think in this specific case, it sort of is a zero-sum game. A lot of people see diversity as like if somebody else has more equality, then I have less, which is not true. That's not how DEI works.
Yeah, it's not pie.
Right, exactly. But if Betazed has Starfleet headquarters, Earth does not. This is a zero-sum game. And so it does feel like we're losing a little bit of something.
And just to remind me, Vulcan, the planet, no longer exists, right?
That is true only in the movies that you saw, which are a different timeline.
Okay, great. So if we're going
in this timeline, the
right.
planet Romulus does not exist.
Okay,
and they were always the bad guys anyway. But now there has been a unification because Romulans and Vulcans were originally the same species and they spun off. Mm-hmm. And now they've been reunited and Romulans exist on the planet Vulcan again. And they've actually renamed the planet. It's not Vulcan anymore. It's something that's more inclusive to both species.
Okay. So why, in your opinion, if we're, the Federation was originated with the 4 planets combining and partnering up, but why do you feel so strongly that the headquarters needs to be on Earth, or Sol 3, I think is what the mom was saying in the last episode, as opposed to one of the other planets that still exist.
Well, just to clarify, I don't feel so strongly. Yeah. But I think if it was on Tellarite or Vulcan or even Andoria, I would be a little bit more okay with that.
Mhm.
But like the Betazoids don't even want to join the Federation. Like he walked away from the negotiating table.
Mhm.
And we're like, you don't even want to be part of us, and yet we'll build our headquarters on your planet. I feel like that on one hand, it's a brilliant bargaining chip, and I'm really glad they did it and that it had the effect desired.
Yeah.
But it also feel like it shouldn't be a bargaining chip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really good point. And as much as both of us really respect and try to be uh, as respectful with diversity, inclusion, and belonging, and with Betazed being kind of hiding behind this wall, and then we're like, oh well, why don't we just move here on the Federation side? I could see the hesitation and I do still stand by what you said. Well, with it is a wise decision, but that does bring up a question in my mind, like why was this a bargaining chip to begin with? Like you said,
I do not know.
maybe we'll find out.
I don't think it's like a mystery or a cliffhanger. I think it's just Caleb inspired Chancellor Ake to think outside the box and offer the Betazed something that the Betazoid, something that they hadn't even thought to ask. And that's why they were so shocked and surprised. And we're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's do that.
And then Caleb dismisses himself from her office
And eats an apple.
and eats the fire fruit.
Yeah. So that's all I have to say about this episode. Did we miss anything important?
The only thing that I also wanted to note is we're having these current landmarks being displayed in 800 years, in this series. Last episode was the Golden Gate Bridge. Alcatraz is shown in this episode, and I really appreciate that. And I don't know if it has any correlation with the song that was chosen for the last episode, because the tribe trying to reclaim Alcatraz as part of their land that was stolen, being around that same time, and now it's being shown in the second episode. But I really like how not only are these homages to the Star Trek universe being shown with whales being pregnant and everything, but also to current day, current events, current landmarks.
Yeah, that's all true. I also wonder if maybe it's just less costly to digitally edit to remove Alcatraz.
Well, maybe, but they could have just filmed it from another side.
That's true. Yeah, I like seeing this continuity, that things that are historically important to us now continue to be so. I'm sure even though it's a very different kind of archaeology, it probably resonates with you in that degree as well.
Yeah, the fact that xenoarchaeology was one of the classes offered, I would totally be there. And yeah, seeing this from an archaeological standpoint, like the historical integrity that's being preserved, either by the show's creators or by Star Trek, the universe itself, in the, what is it, 32nd century. So being able to have that respected. But one thing that I did find a little disappointing when it came to historical perspective is that apparently consent is just as questionable now, with Darren putting his arms around Genesis and Sam without their consent, as it was, it's just the same 800 years from now as it is today.
Well, that's how we know he's the bad guy.
Oh, that. Yeah. Okay. Check mark.
On the bright side, though, we do see him not only being roommates with Caleb, but also helping him to make his bed.
Yeah, at the very end. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I have had people in my life with whom I worked well, but did not like personally. But our personal feelings didn't get in the way of us being good coworkers. And I think that's what we're going to see here. Like, we're not going to see these characters sabotaging each other to try to get one to fail and flunk out of Starfleet Academy. I think they're going to work well together. They just won't like it.
Yeah. I don't see that level of maliciousness,
Yeah.
like trying to get somebody kicked out of Starfleet Academy. Even in the last episode when Caleb like obviously did something so bad that it almost killed everybody,
Yep.
but with the communication. But even then, like they weren't saying, nobody was rallying to try to kick them out.
Yeah. There is one important part of the show that we would be remiss to not discuss at least once before signing off, and that would be Tig Notaro.
This is true. I was just waiting for this moment. In the off chance that Tig is listening to this podcast, I am just such a big fan. And I am going to plan on going back and watching most of the Star Trek series, mainly because of folks like Jerry Ryan, Tig Notaro, Robert Picardo, all these really great actors that I have so much respect for and are hilarious and very, they have such range. And the fact that Tig's still around and she's even surprised by that. But yeah, she's the one who said, she had Caleb come up to the front of the class, like you were mentioning before, and said, who are you? And she restated that when Caleb answered. She's like, no, who are you? Like, who is it that you are as a person? I thought was really helpful.
Yeah, she is somebody who she said physics hates her because she was like literally 1,000 years in the future. We also have Chancellor Ake, who's 400 years old. We have Dr. or Robert Picardo, who's 800 years old. So we have a lot of storied characters on this show.
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen Tig Notaro in anything but Star Trek. I would love to go back and watch her in the 2021 zombie heist film Army of the Dead.
Army of the Dead, yes.
You've seen it?
I have. And the story about that movie is just so interesting, how Tig was filmed after it had all wrapped up. She's never even met most of the cast. And but she does such a great job.
Mhm.
And the crush that I have on her is just, of course, infinitely raised both by her existence in the Star Trek universe as well as in that movie and One Mississippi and other things that she's been in, podcasts that I've read, that I've heard of her. I mean, she's been through so much, and she provides such a great amount of levity while also wisdom. And I really appreciate that with her character as well as her as a person.
Gotcha. Yeah, me too. I loved that combination of her in Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to go back and watch those episodes with you.
Yes.
I don't need to rewatch the first season, but as soon as you're ready to watch the second, you let me know and I'll be there.
Okay, I will put it on the watch list.
Such a long watch list.
No, we're just adding more to this.
It's fine. But we also have, in the short term, 8 more episodes of Starfleet Academy on our watch list.
Yes.
It's going to be airing
First
every
things first.
Thursday, and we'll be airing this podcast every other week. I have no idea what's coming. I don't know if they're going to find Caleb's mother in the first season. I don't remember, have Starfleet Academy already been renewed for another season? Because this often happens. And yes, production on the second season began in August of 2025.
Okay. Yeah.
So we will be watching Starfleet Academy every Thursday until March 12th. And we'll be airing this podcast every other week with me, Chief Engineer Ken Gagney, and you, Cadet Staci Lee.
That'd be me.
That'd be you.
Looking forward to it.
Me too. Until next time.
Live long and prosper.
If you've enjoyed this episode, please leave a review on iTunes and keep your hailing frequencies open by following us on Twitter @TransporterLock or subscribing to our podcast and email newsletter at transporterlock.com.
Was that what I was supposed to say?